Of Pastor Brad there at Nature Coast Church, and welcome to another edition of Rhythms of Grace here on the Nature Coast channel. I am so delighted that you're here with me this afternoon. I'm always getting messages. I'm totally grateful that you allow me to be a part of what's going on here. One of the things about this particular season is we're getting ready for Lent, especially at the table. Tomorrow is Ash Wednesday. That's the beginning of the Lenten season. And we spend some time, 6 weeks, leading up to the Holy Week, Good Friday, Easter, and really it's the culmination of Christmas. Everything that started at Advent and Christmas leads up to Lent and Easter. In fact, Easter is the goal of Christmas. That Jesus was born so that he could die and rise again for you and me. And so Lent is a season in which we are preparing ourselves for the observance of and the remembering of Christ's death and resurrection. It's a little more than that, because Christ's death and resurrection are constantly being given to us in word and sacrament. So we're going to talk about that today, but we're going to talk a little bit about Lent. What is Lent? Why do we observe it? And I know some of you probably don't. That's okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. Tomorrow, Ash Wednesday, begins the Lenten season, and the ash on our foreheads is a reminder that we are dust, that we are headed back to dust, that death is always with us. But we're also reminded that we always need Jesus, because we are dust, and are always in the process of becoming dust, because we're headed again to our death at some point. That we need Jesus, and Jesus became ash for us. That's what we're talking about tomorrow. But Ash Wednesday and having ash on our foreheads is just a reminder that we need Jesus. And then, of course, we get into the Lent season. Usually when we talk about Lent, everybody wants to know what'd you give up, because Lent is associated with giving up something. It's a season of repentance, a season of humility, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And so when we think about what we're giving up, typically what you hear, when I hear, like, we're giving up chocolate, we're giving up calories, we're giving up ice cream. In the Catholic tradition, typically the 6 weeks of Lent are giving up meat, and so every restaurant has seafood, and that's a great time to be Chad Bresson, because I love seafood. So this time of year, there's lots of seafood to be eaten in the restaurants, and so I suppose that's one reason why I look forward to Lent. But Lent is a season of repentance, and when we talk about repentance, man, there's a lot of disinformation and fake news out there about what repentance is. And repentance, really all repentance is confessing sin. In fact, this is part of the rhythm of life. It's not just for Lent. The rhythm of life is confessing our sin, confessing what we've done, agreeing with God, hey, what I've done is wrong, confessing our sin, and then turning away from ourselves to Jesus, turning away from our sin to Jesus. And it's the fake news is that repentance means cleaning up the life. That's not repentance. That's penance. That's not repentance. Repentance is the flip side of faith. And faith is placing all your trust, all your eggs are in the Jesus basket. Really, that's what repentance is. Repentance is just placing all your eggs in the Jesus basket. He obeyed because I can't, and I don't, and I won't. I'm a sinner. I'm gonna be. We're sinners until we die. So we're living this constant, everyday rhythm of confession, repentance, and faith. And Jesus then is in the constant business of giving us grace and forgiveness. So thinking about, again, what are we giving up? If what we're turning away from, if you want to do something for Lent, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with fasting, fasting from something. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Always make sure that you've got the physical okay to do it. Some people can't fast, and make sure you're not going to put your health in jeopardy by fasting. But one thing I want us to think about in fasting, by the way, Pastor Brad, he's a lot better at talking about fasting than I am, because he's constantly living this life. What do I need to get rid of in my thinking? And that's what I'm talking about today. The one thing that I keep coming back to, and it's actually part of Lent, and that's humility. In fact, there's such a close link between repentance and humility. Some have suggested that the whole season of Lent, and the reason why we have Lent, is for us to be in a constant state of humility. Humility does not come to us, or is not part of us. It's naturally. We're sinners. Pride is inherent to everything we do, think, and say, not humility. But I'm thinking about humility this time, this season of Lent. And again, just kind of focusing on that, and we'll be focusing on that for 6 weeks. And here's why. Humility is sorely lacking in our culture. And I think Christians have an opportunity here to be examples of what it means to live a life of humility in this Lenten season. And again, I say that knowing full well that nobody's really humble. We're not naturally humble. Nobody is. Because pride is inherent to who we are. Humility is given to us by Jesus. But even in our culture, there is an increased lack of humility. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is this pursuit. There's this big pursuit to always have to be right. We always have to be right. There's no humility in that. And the more that we pursue having to be right, there's no grace, there's no love, there's no humility in that at all. I have heard people say in the past, well, you don't have to be humble when it comes to the truth. I'm not sure that's not how the Bible describes it. In fact, you don't see Jesus doing that unless he's with the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are their own group. But when Jesus is with common folk, when Jesus is with the rest of us, no, he's not doing that. That's what means, we talk about speaking the truth in love. The adage in our Christianity these days is speaking the truth is love, and that's not what the scriptures say. The scriptures say speaking the truth in love. It means we speak the truth, but we have a demeanor, and when we speak, it is done in a posture of humility. Now, I understand that what I'm saying, a lot of this is law. Law is meant to show us our need for Jesus. And if there's any place where we see our need for Jesus, is in this lack of humility. The cross is our paradigm for all of life. All of life. Not just a little bit of it, not just for conversion. You see, we have this picture of Jesus being on this grand, big, glorious throne. And he is. There is this picture. But the throne, as it interacts and intersects with us on an everyday basis, that's the cross. The cross is his throne. The cross is where Jesus rules and reigns. And it's very easy for even, theologians talk about his age of humiliation, and now it's his age of exaltation. Yes, he is in his age of exaltation. But in time and space, the cross is how Jesus comes to us, and how Jesus interacts with us, and is how we are to be with our neighbors. The cross. So as we think about, what we're giving up during this Lenten season, I encourage you, think about pursuing the need to be right. Speaking the truth in love. Any sentence that has this idea that The most loving thing I can do for you right now, I guarantee you, whatever follows that opening line isn't gracious, isn't loving, and isn't biblical. It isn't. It isn't. The law is never, ever loving. And I always have to wonder why it is when we're pursuing the need to be right, why it always has to focus on the law and the commands. That should tell us something about our Christianity. And again, that's not to say that we don't need the commands. It's not to say we don't need the law. We do. We have to see what it means to not come up to Christ's standard. Those things also function as a guide for life. But I always have to wonder why we always want to emphasize that when we're talking about speaking the truth in love. We're not talking about the gospel. Why can't we pursue their need to be right when it comes to the gospel? Who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And our passivity in receiving all of that in faith. And how that becomes our paradigm for all of life. There's something to be said for our constant, pursuit of the need to be right, always in terms of law. There's no humility there. And our lives should be marked by humility. Again, that's law. It's impossible. And blessing me, I'm never humble enough. But I need to remind myself that that's my paradigm. That's what the cross is telling me. That's what the cross is for me. And that's what I am to be for my neighbor. My neighbor needs me in a constant posture of humility. Even when I'm speaking the truth. Even when I'm speaking the law, my posture is humility and grace and peace. That is our rhythms of grace. Rhythms of grace. That's who Jesus is. Jesus is constantly giving us grace. Constantly operating out of the cross to us, giving us his mercy, giving us his grace, giving us his love. It's all unconditional. No strings attached. And that's how we're to be for our neighbor. Our neighbor needs us to do that. Until next time, remember that you are loved by Jesus. You are absolutely, unconditionally loved by Jesus. And he always, always has you. If you have any questions, if you'd like to make some comments, feel free to leave that here on the Nature Coast Facebook page. I'd love to interact with you about all this. And certainly, I'll be the first to admit, this isn't easy for me, and I'm the worst at it. And feel free to point that out. Because I need you, and you need me